40 minutes before the ceremony, Lila's groom vanishes without a trace. What was meant to be the happiest day of her life turns into a nightmare. 2 years later, while pausing their old wedding video, she spots something chilling. A man with a distinctive tattoo reflected behind Evan, and she recognizes it from a forgotten photo. Enjoy the story. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts about the ending in the comments. Your support helps us create more deep and gripping stories just for you. There's more to come. The morning of Lila Hartman's wedding began like something out of a magazine. The skies were crisp and blue. The venue, an old restored vineyard just outside of Chicago, buzzed with soft music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne flutes. Pale roses lined the aisle, guests in summer linens took their seats, and Lila stood in the bridal suite, still and glowing in her white silk dress, surrounded by her closest friends. She checked the time, 3:20 p.m. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock. "Has anyone seen Evan?" she asked casually, smoothing the lace on her sleeve. "He's with his brother, I think." "Don't worry." Her maid of honor, June, smiled. "Grooms always disappear right before. It's like a ritual. Panic, bourbon, then vows." Lila laughed, but something unsettled curled in her stomach. She had spoken to Evan just an hour ago. He'd sounded nervous, sure, but loving. "Steady." He'd said, "See you at the altar, Lyles." By 3:40, the joke started to turn into concerned glances. The photographer asked if they should begin with solo shots of the bride. The wedding planner paced. Lila tried calling Evan. Voicemail. Then again. Still nothing. At 3:55, Evan's brother returned, alone, pale. "I can't find him," he said, eyes darting. The ceremony didn't begin. By 4:15, Lila's hands shook as she stood barefoot on the venue lawn, watching the guests murmur and frown. Her father's voice cracked as he made the announcement. There had been an unexpected delay. At 4:40, the police arrived. Evan Mitchell, 29, financial analyst, fiancé, son, brother, was gone. His phone off. His car, untouched. No CCTV footage showed him leaving the vineyard grounds. No note. No explanation. Just an empty dressing room and a navy suit hanging neatly on a wooden hanger. The hours blurred into a stunned evening. Guests trickled out quietly. The string quartet packed up without playing a single song, and Lila sat on the edge of the bridal suite couch, staring blankly at her bouquet. But late that night, the videographer, Marcus, called. "I didn't want to bother you, but I reviewed some of the footage I took before everything happened," he said, voice hushed. "There's a clip about an hour before the ceremony. Evan was talking to someone. Someone." Lila's voice cracked. "I don't know who. I couldn't get a good look at the guy's face. But Evan, he looked shaken, like he'd seen a ghost." Lila didn't sleep that night, and the next morning, she watched the clip herself. Evan stood near the edge of the vineyard, back turned slightly to the camera. He was talking, no, arguing, with someone just outside the frame. At one point, he looked directly into the camera for a fleeting second, his expression unreadable. Then he walked away. It was the last time anyone ever saw him, and nothing made sense. 2 years had passed since Evan vanished. No trace, no ransom, no sightings, just absence. The initial media storm faded within months. The police followed dozens of leads, all dead ends. They checked hospitals, bus stations, airports. They interviewed guests, staff, and Evan's friends. No signs of foul play, no financial irregularities, no history of mental illness. It was like he dissolved into the air. Eventually, people moved on. Evan's parents stopped calling detectives and started talking about closure. Friends stopped bringing up his name. His brother got married. Lila, though, didn't move on. She learned to pretend. She sold the dress, boxed the invitations, and deleted the wedding playlist from her phone. But she didn't forget. Couldn't. She hadn't touched the wedding video in nearly 2 years. It was saved on a hard drive in her drawer, collecting dust like an open wound. But one rainy April evening, something pulled her toward it. Maybe boredom, maybe grief, maybe just loneliness in its purest form. She watched the first 5 minutes in silence. There he was, Evan, laughing with the groomsmen, adjusting his cufflinks, brushing invisible dust off his blazer. Her heart clenched. He looked so alive, so real. She could practically hear his voice, smell his cologne. And then, without thinking, her finger paused the video. The screen froze. Evan was standing near the vineyard's stone archway, half turned toward someone off camera. His posture was tense, and behind him, in the faint reflection of the glass door, was a figure. Lila leaned forward. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable. A man in dark clothes, partially obscured. But what caught her breath, what made her hands go cold, was the sharp glint of ink on his forearm. A tattoo. 2 interlocked triangles with a vertical line through them. She knew that symbol. Her mind spun. It had been years ago. She was sure of it. On a road trip Evan took to Montana with college friends. One of the photos he'd shown her back then was of a bonfire in the woods. There'd been a group of guys, one of them with that exact tattoo, shirtless and grinning at the camera, beer in hand. Evan had laughed when she asked about him. Just some guy we met near the lake. Crazy stories, but chill. I think his name was Reese or Ross. That trip, that tattoo, that man, he was there, at the vineyard, an hour before Evan disappeared. Lila's blood roared in her ears. She dug through her old photo folders until she found it. Montana trip, July 2017. There it was, the bonfire shot. Same ink, same man, shaggy dark hair, wolfish grin. Why had he been to the wedding? Why didn't Evan ever mention him again? Shaking, she copied the still frame from the wedding video and placed it side by side with the old photo. Same tattoo, same man, no question. Her chest tightened with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Urgency. She opened her laptop, pulled up social media, and started digging. She didn't know what she was looking for, but someone had been there that day. And maybe, just maybe, he knew why Evan had vanished. The name came after 2 nights of almost no sleep. Lila scoured every online platform she could access. Old university message boards, Reddit threads, Facebook albums from years back. It was like trying to reconstruct a ghost from ashes. But the photo from the Montana trip proved invaluable. She ran it through an image search engine, then again with the tattoo isolated and enhanced. That's when a comment thread from an old backpacking forum lit up her screen. A user named Trailhawk83 had posted the exact same tattoo on a discussion about strange symbols seen in national parks. Another user replied, "Pretty sure that's Alex Gordon's mark. Guy was into some messed up survivalist stuff. Vanished back in 2018. Cops looked into him for a missing person case in Idaho." Alex Gordon. The name rang no bells. She searched it anyway, and fell into a dark rabbit hole. A handful of old articles, the kind you only find if you're desperate or stubborn, described Gordon as a person of interest in several criminal investigations, mostly in rural states. Idaho, Wyoming, Montana. A girl had gone missing from a music festival in 2017. A ranger found her car parked deep in the woods, keys still inside. Gordon's name came up, but nothing stuck. Then in 2018, he himself vanished after a brief police chase involving illegal firearms. No convictions, no confirmed sightings in over 5 years. And yet, there he was, standing behind Evan on Lila's wedding day. At the edge of the frame, half-shadowed, but unmistakable. She printed the still, circled the tattoo, attached it with the 2017 photo, then marched into the nearest police station. Detective Shelburne, the same officer who'd handled Evan's case 2 years ago, blinked as she laid the pages out on his desk. "I appreciate you bringing this in, Ms. Hartman," he said, noncommittally, scratching his head. "But we don't have any proof that this is Gordon. You said it yourself. You can't even see his full face." "But the tattoo," she insisted, pointing. "It's exactly the same. And he was there, minutes before Evan disappeared." Shelburne gave a tired sigh. "Coincidences happen. The man you're talking about went missing himself years ago. And there's no confirmed connection between him and Evan, except one camping photo from, 2017. Lila leaned forward, voice sharp with frustration. "He was at my wedding. Evan argued with someone before vanishing, and I found that person. You can't tell me that's not worth looking into." Shelburne hesitated, then softened his tone. "Look, I know how hard this still is. But we chased every lead, Lila. Maybe Evan got cold feet. Maybe something else happened, something unrelated. But we can't reopen a case on the basis of a partial reflection and an unproven ID. I'm sorry. He stood up, a gentle signal the conversation was over. Lila left the station with her file folder pressed tightly to her chest, pulse pounding. The spring air felt suddenly sharp and metallic. They weren't going to help. No one was. But this wasn't a coincidence. Evan hadn't vanished by choice, and Alex Gordon hadn't been there by accident. If the police weren't going to look for answers, she would. The Gordon lead left Lila with more questions than answers, and no support from the police. Her next move wasn't easy, but she had no choice. She hadn't spoken to Evan's parents in over a year. After the search was officially closed, they'd slowly withdrawn from her life. Their grief had turned brittle and quiet, like porcelain cracking under pressure. But if anyone knew something, anything, it had to be them. She called first. Evan's mother, Mary Ann, answered after the third ring. Her voice was thin but polite, tinged with the fatigue of a woman who had aged too fast. Yes, come by if you must. Just don't expect answers we don't have. The Gresham house looked just as it had that week of the wedding. Red brick, prune hedges, wind chimes tinkling faintly near the porch. Only now it felt hushed, like even the walls were grieving. Mary Ann greeted her with a fragile smile. She looked smaller now, thinner. Her eyes scanned Lila's face with wary compassion. Inside, the house smelled like chamomile tea and lemon furniture polish. They sat in the living room. Evan's childhood photos still hung on the wall, a younger version of him smiling through missing teeth, cradling a golden retriever, posing in his college graduation robe. Marion spoke first. I wish I could tell you we've had some miracle, but we haven't. No calls, no letters. Evan's gone, Lila. We don't know why, but we've accepted it. Lila nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. I haven't. Not yet. From the hallway, footsteps echoed. Then Evan's father, Mark, entered, taller than she remembered, grayer too. He nodded stiffly, then sat in an armchair without a word. He barely looked at her. Something about his presence made the air tense. Do you remember anyone Evan was in touch with those last few weeks? Lila asked. Anyone strange? Anything off? Marianne shook her head. He was stressed, sure. Work, wedding planning. But nothing unusual. He didn't mention anyone suspicious. Lila turned toward Mark. What about you? Did he say anything that didn't make sense? Did he ever seem scared? Mark's jaw twitched. He cleared his throat. No, he said flatly. Nothing. But Lila didn't believe him. His eyes darted, too quickly. His fingers tapped his knee, an unconscious rhythm. He was hiding something. She didn't press him. Not yet. Later that night, back at her apartment, Lila reopened Evan's old email account. She still had access. It had been created years ago with a shared recovery phone. She scrolled through the inbox. Mostly wedding details, logistics, vendor confirmations. She was about to log off when a flag message caught her eye. From node@reply.1982@protonmail.com. Date, 2 weeks before the wedding. Subject, we should talk before it's too late. The body of the message was short. I know you think you can keep this buried, but some debts don't die. I'm in town. You owe me that conversation. No name. No signature. Lila's skin prickled. She checked the email header. No identifiable metadata. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. Evan had never mentioned it. Never replied, as far as she could see. But the timing was impossible to ignore. 2 weeks before the wedding. Right before everything unraveled. Lila couldn't sleep. The anonymous email kept looping in her mind like a haunting melody she couldn't turn off. She stared at the screen, rereading it again and again, until a new wave of tension rolled through her chest. Then she noticed something else. A second message, sent 3 days after the first. Same address. Same cryptic tone. Subject, you need to know. Body, he's lying. If you marry him, he'll disappear. I'm not the threat. He is. Lila's blood ran cold. She leaned back, pulse racing. The first time she'd read the email, she thought someone was threatening Evan. But now, this second message twisted everything. The phrasing was specific, deliberate. He'll disappear. He's lying. I'm not the threat. The message wasn't threatening Evan. It was warning her about him. Lila closed the laptop and stared into the darkness of her living room. Shadows from the streetlight curled across the ceiling like reaching hands. Her mind buzzed with all the little things she dismissed over the years. The brief silences when Evan got phone calls from unknown numbers. The way he'd sometimes stare off in thought, detached, then catch himself and smile like nothing was wrong. The one time she'd found an old wallet in his drawer, with a different name on the ID, but he'd laughed it off. College prank, he'd said. Was that all it had been? She went to the small linen box, where she kept the few things of his she hadn't been able to part with. A cufflink, a note he'd written her on the day he proposed, and his backup phone, the one he used during their hiking trips, when signal was bad and he didn't want to drain his main phone's battery. She hadn't looked at it in nearly 2 years. To her surprise, it still turned on. Most of the messages were old and irrelevant. But in the call log, one number appeared repeatedly during the weeks before the wedding. A burner line. Always the same area code, Wyoming. And one name in the contacts, MG. Lila stared at the initials. Not a name she recognized. Not a friend. Not a family member. She went back to the email, now analyzing the syntax, the sentence rhythm. She'd taken enough psychology courses to know. Tone reveals motive. This wasn't written by someone unhinged. It was written by someone desperate. The idea that Evan had kept secrets wasn't new. She had suspected stress, maybe some anxiety, a fear of commitment. But now it felt deeper, darker. What if Evan hadn't been taken? What if he ran? Or worse, what if this had been planned? Lila pulled out a notepad and began to sketch a web of the information she had. The tattoo, Alex Gordon, the cryptic email, the burner phone, MG, and Evan at the center. She circled his name. Who were you really? She whispered. And in the back of her mind, a terrible question echoed. Had she ever truly known the man she was going to marry? The more Lila dug, the less sense anything made. Her gut told her she was onto something real, something dangerous, but she couldn't keep chasing shadows alone. She needed help. Someone who wouldn't write her off as an obsessed ex-fiancé, still clinging to grief. So she found Simon Davis, a retired homicide detective turned private investigator. Simon had a reputation for two things: cutting through lies and charging by the hour with no patience for fantasy. His office sat above a pawn shop on the east side of town, smelling faintly of stale coffee and worn leather. Simon opened the door himself. Tall, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen too much. "You're the bride," he said flatly, after she introduced herself. "Ex-bride," she replied. "Technically." He gestured to the chair across from his cluttered desk. "Tell me what you think happened. Then I'll tell you if I'm wasting my time." Lila laid it all out. Evan's disappearance 40 minutes before their wedding. The paused wedding video with the man in the mirror. The email, the burner phone, and the unknown initials MG. Simon didn't interrupt. He just listened, arms folded, occasionally jotting a note. When she finished, he exhaled through his nose. Sounds like a missing person case with an unusual hook. But 2 years is a long time. You know the odds, right? "I don't care about the odds," she said. "I care about the truth." That made him pause. After a beat, he nodded. "All right, I'll look into him. But if this leads nowhere, you pay for nowhere." Lila handed him what she had. Evan's old ID, a few digital files, and access to the email account. Within 3 days, Simon called. "Come in. We need to talk." Back in his office, he slid a folder across the desk. "I pulled everything I could. Education records, employment history, travel logs. It looks clean. Too clean." "What do you mean?" "Your fiancé spent 2 years abroad, supposedly working as a freelance consultant. Except there's no tax records, no job history, no entry stamps in or out of the U.S. for that entire period. Just a vague note in a university alumni update that he'd lived in Iceland for a while. No photos, no social media posts, nothing." Lila felt her stomach tighten. No proof he was even in Iceland. Simon shook his head. No proof he was anywhere. It's like he disappeared, then came back and picked up a life he invented. He leaned forward. People who vanish like that usually have a reason. Debt, crime, running from someone, or to someone. Lila felt the walls of her understanding crack again. Simon tapped the folder. He had secrets, Miss Harper. Big ones. And if he lied about his past, odds are he was lying about the present too. She looked at the folder, then at the cold ring mark her coffee had left on his desk. Somewhere in those 2 missing years was the key. She had loved a man who might never have existed. The next tip came from an unlikely source, a disgruntled former landlord who tried to sell off unclaimed belongings from an unpaid storage unit. Simon had been tracking any rental under the name Thomas Reynolds or Evan Harper, and this lead stood out, a leased property under a shell name, tied to a warehouse just beyond the city limits. It was nearly sunset when Simon and Lila reached the place. The building loomed at the edge of a gravel road, weather-beaten and quiet, half swallowed by tall grass and rusted fencing. A broken lock dangled from the gate. The air around it felt heavy, still, like the world was holding its breath. "This is it," Simon muttered, pulling a flashlight from his coat. "Stay behind me." They entered carefully, boots echoing against concrete as the beam of light swept across dust-covered shelves, forgotten crates, and cracked windows. The deeper they walked, the stronger the musty, metallic scent became. Lila's fingers trembled around the flashlight she carried. Then they found it, a tarp-covered table in the far corner. Beneath it, a small trunk filled with personal items, photos, a watch, notebooks, and an envelope marked with Evan's handwriting, in case of emergency. Lila picked up a photo. Evan, no, Thomas, standing on a snowy street she didn't recognize, arm around a man whose face was eerily familiar. The same tattoo as in the wedding video. The man from the mirror. "It's him," Lila whispered. "Alex Gordon." Simon nodded grimly. They knew each other. Possibly worked together. Maybe more. Another box held several old burner phones, each labeled in Evan's handwriting. Berlin, Helsinki, Dallas. But then the tone shifted. Just past the table, a toppled chair, a long scrape along the concrete. And near the wall, dried blood, almost black under the flashlight's glare. Lila's stomach twisted. "Oh my God." Simon crouched beside it, inspecting faint drag marks that led toward the back exit. "There was a struggle," he said. "Someone got hurt, maybe worse. And no one cleaned it up." Lila stepped back, suddenly lightheaded. This wasn't just secrets. This was violence. She thought of the email warning. "If you marry him, he'll disappear." Had someone made that happen? Simon stood. "We're not just chasing a runaway anymore. He gestured to the scene. "This looks like someone wanted him silenced. And he might have seen it coming." Lila stood at the Garrison family's doorstep for the second time in a month. The early evening sky behind her was painted in muted purples and grays, as if the world itself was holding back something unsaid. When Evan's father, Mark, opened the door, his eyes darkened with recognition and something deeper, weariness. "I told you last time," he began. "We've made peace with—" "No, you haven't," Lila interrupted, her voice low but firm. "Neither have I, and I think you know more than you let on." He hesitated. She could see it, the small twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way his fingers gripped the edge of the door tighter. She pressed forward. "I found a warehouse outside of town. His things were there, photos, notes, phones. There was blood, Mr. Garrison." He paled. He was terrified. Of something. Or someone. And then he vanished 40 minutes before we were supposed to start a life together. "Tell me, Mark, was that his choice? Or someone else's?" The silence between them stretched. Then, slowly, he opened the door wider and motioned for her to come in. The living room was exactly as she remembered. Neat, cold, unchanging. A house waiting for someone who'd never return. He sat down, rubbed his face with both hands, and for the first time in 2 years broke. "You were never supposed to know," he said hoarsely. "It was the one thing he begged me to protect." Lila sat across from him, breath shallow. He wasn't just hiding from his past, Richard continued. He was part of something larger. Years ago, he testified against a man named Conrad Chevalier, used to run offshore operations for a corrupt tech firm. Evan, Thomas. He was the one who leaked their data, brought the whole house of cards down. Lila blinked. The corporate espionage case. Mark nodded. They put him in witness protection. New identity. New city. New life. He kept his head down. Until you. She swallowed hard. What happened before the wedding? Mark's eyes welled. He got a call. No name. No number. Just a voice. Said they knew who he was. Said if he didn't disappear, you'd pay the price. Lila sat back in stunned silence. So he ran. Mark whispered. He loved you enough to vanish to protect you. It felt like a tidal wave crashing inside her chest. All this time, She thought he'd left her, but he'd sacrificed everything to keep her safe. And no one looked for him? She asked quietly. They warned him, Lila. One step out of line, and it wouldn't be just him who paid. He believed them. Her hands clenched in her lap. Well, she said softly, with a new resolve burning in her voice, I'm not afraid of shadows anymore. She stood. If someone made him disappear to silence him, I'm going to find them. The name came through late at night. Simon texted her only 2 words. Found him. Lila barely slept. By sunrise, she was already in Simon's small office tucked between an insurance agency and a coffee shop. The detective looked more tired than usual, dark circles under his eyes, and a thick folder on the table in front of him. Conrad Chevalier, he said, flipping it open. That's the name your fiancé was running from. Ring a bell. Lila shook her head. He was untouchable for years. A French-American businessman. Legit on paper, tech investments, clean money. But beneath it, he ran one of the most sophisticated white-collar crime syndicates in North America. Money laundering, insider trading, offshore accounts linked to weapons deals. You name it. Simon tapped a photo, paper-clipped, inside the file. A clean-cut man in a sharp suit, mid-50s, smiling beside politicians at a gala. Evan, Thomas, worked for a tech firm that unknowingly built data infrastructure for one of Chevalier's shell companies. He stumbled on the wrong code, followed the trail, and reported it. He didn't realize what he was stepping into. Lila leaned closer. The leak that exposed those accounts 3 years ago. That was Evan. Simon nodded. He was the ghost whistleblower, the one the FBI protected. But then, why wasn't he safe? She asked, voice raw. Simon sat back. He was. For a while. But when he got engaged, someone saw the announcement. Lila's stomach dropped. Our engagement photo, she whispered. It ran in the Riverton Post. Small-town news, but public. Exactly. Someone from Chevalier's side still had eyes out. That's when they found him. The phone call, the threat, it was a warning. Don't get married. Don't get comfortable. Or she dies. Lila closed her eyes, shaking. So it's my fault. No, Simon said quickly, firmly. It's theirs. They exploited what he loved most. That's how real monsters work. Silence sat heavy between them until Lila spoke again. Why didn't the FBI protect him again? They think Chevalier's empire collapsed after the leak. Officially, he disappeared to Geneva, died in a boating accident 6 months ago. Case closed. But you don't believe that. Simon frowned. Bodies like his don't just vanish. No witnesses, no remains. Just a file that says presumed dead. Lila exhaled shakily. So if he's alive, and still running things, then Evan, Thomas, might be dead. Or still hiding. Her eyes lifted to meet his. Then we find him. And we find Chevalier. I don't care if the FBI gave up. I'm not going to. Simon gave a slow nod. Then we start where the thread was pulled. Your wedding. Lila stood, fists clenched. Then let's unravel the rest of it. The wedding video had become a ritual. At first, it was a wound Lila couldn't stop reopening, a memory of a life interrupted. Now it was evidence. Clues frozen in time, waiting to be seen differently. Simon had pulled favors and gained access to security footage from the wedding venue. Angles she hadn't seen before. The owner had kept the old hard drives, mostly forgotten, in a storage room. They brought everything to Simon's office and loaded it onto a monitor. It felt surreal watching that day again. The tables being set, guests laughing, the gentle chaos of hair and makeup in the bridal suite. A world moments away from collapse. There, Lila said suddenly, pointing at the screen. Simon froze the frame. It was the man with the tattoo, Alec Gordon. Clearer now, not just a reflection. He was standing near the side entrance, dressed like a guest, but always on the periphery, hands in pockets, wearing dark sunglasses. Simon zoomed in slowly, frame by frame. Alec never approached Evan. He's watching you, Simon murmured. Lila leaned forward. Her heart thudded as she saw it. Alec's eyes tracking her through the crowd as she moved, laughed, hugged relatives. His body shifted every time she did, not Evan. Why would he be watching me? She asked, voice tight. Simon didn't answer immediately. He scrubbed forward in the footage. Alec never came closer, never spoke to anyone. But for 20 solid minutes, He paced in sync with Lila's movements, a shadow on the edge of a perfect day. Maybe he was there to make sure Evan left, Simon said finally. Or maybe he was the backup plan. If Evan didn't walk away, Alec would make sure something else happened. Lila's skin chilled. He wasn't just watching. He was waiting. Simon turned to her, his tone shifting. Lila, you need to consider something. She met his eyes. If Evan went into hiding to protect you, and if Alec Gordon was there to stop him from failing that mission, then Gordon may not be the enemy. Not entirely. Lila stared at the screen again, at the man with the inked forearm and cold stillness in his posture. Something wasn't adding up. Alec's presence had always felt like a threat. But what if he wasn't there to hurt her? What if he was there to save her? And what if someone else was still watching? As the footage ended, a new certainty bloomed in Lila's chest. If Alec was still alive, he knew where Evan was. Or what had become of him? She looked at Simon. We find him next. Simon nodded once. And we start with a tattoo. The tattoo was the key. Simon traced it to a prison gang known as the Hollow Suns, now mostly defunct, absorbed into other syndicates. Alec Gordon had been loosely affiliated with them before his disappearance. But it wasn't the gang that broke the case open. It was a blurry, almost forgotten detail Simon remembered from one of the warehouse photos. A receipt with a partial address, tucked inside an old wallet. It led to a P.O. box in Colorado. From there, Simon followed digital breadcrumbs, VPNs, dummy accounts, patterns in online behavior. He worked quietly, sometimes without telling Lila everything. He didn't want to raise her hopes too soon. But one night, he called her in. I think I found him, Simon said, his face pale with something between shock and awe. Not Alec. Evan. Lila froze. They sat in front of his computer. A grainy photo filled the screen, taken 2 months ago from a local news article about a community mural in a small Colorado town. Among the volunteers, a man wearing sunglasses and a hat, mostly in shadow. But Lila would have known him anywhere. Evan, she whispered. He goes by Luke Hendricks now, Simon explained. Moved here about 1.5 years ago. Works in restoration and mural projects. Keeps to himself. Paid cash for everything for months. Classic low-profile behavior. But recently, he opened another tab, a social media account, under a fake name, but with unmistakable patterns. Likes on photos from Lila's sister's account. Comments on public pages she followed. Careful but consistent. He's been watching you, Simon said. Carefully. For months. Lila stared at the screen, heart pounding. Her breath caught somewhere between fury and relief. Why hadn't he reached out? Simon answered the question she hadn't voiced. I think Evan, or Thomas, or Luke, knew he had to disappear. He staged it. It wasn't abandonment. It was strategy. Lila looked up at him, eyes wide. He vanished not to escape you, but to protect you. If he stayed, you were the weak point. She swallowed. So he let them believe he'd cracked. Left me heartbroken. So they'd stop watching. Simon nodded. And now he's watching back. Quietly. Carefully. Lila stood, trembling slightly. I need to see him, she said. Simon placed a steady hand on her arm. And if he runs again? Lila's voice hardened. Then I'll chase him. Lila stared at the blank message box for what felt like hours. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. What did you say to someone who left you at the altar to save your life? I know who you are. Delete. Why did you let me think you were dead? Delete. Finally, she settled on something simple. Honest. I saw you. Please, let me see you again. L. She hit send before she could stop herself. For 3 days, there was nothing. No notification, no reply. She jumped at every phone vibration, every ding. The not knowing made it hard to sleep, to eat. Simon told her to be patient, but he knew, too. It was like waiting on the edge of a cliff, unsure if the wind would carry you or push you over. Then, on the 4th night, a message arrived. Short. Controlled. This isn't safe. But I'll call. Tomorrow. 9 p.m. Her pulse spiked. She typed back okay, but there was no seen checkmark. No further response. At 8:59 p.m. the next evening, Lila sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone as if it were made of fire. The ring came at exactly 9 o'clock. She answered on the first buzz. Lila, came the voice on the other end. Familiar. Soft. Deeper somehow, as if weighed by years of silence. Evan, she whispered. Or Thomas. Or Luke. I don't even know what to call you. He sighed. Call me yours. For the time I have left. Her heart cracked all over again. I thought you were dead. I know. You let me grieve you. I had to. They were watching. If I stayed, they'd have hurt you. Or worse. Tears welled in her eyes. I saw the tattoo. Alec Gordon. The warehouse. The blood. You were never planning to marry me, were you? God, Lila, don't say that, he said, and his voice cracked. I wanted that day more than anything in the world. I still dream about it. Silence stretched between them. Why now? She finally asked. I've been following from a distance. I saw you looking into it. I tried to stop you, left dead ends, blocked trails. But you kept digging. So meet me, she said. One time. Face to face. He hesitated. If they catch wind of this. One time, she repeated firmer. Then I'll let go. If that's what you need. But I need to look you in the eye once. I need to understand. There was a pause. Then a breath. Tomorrow, he said. The old train station. Off Route 17. Noon. No one else. The line went dead. Lila stared at the screen in silence. Tomorrow, she would see him. And nothing would ever be the same again. The abandoned train station looked like a ghost of its former self. Weathered bricks, shattered windows, ivy creeping through rusted beams. It was the kind of place time had forgotten. But to Lila, it pulsed with every heartbeat. Every echo of the life she'd almost had. She stood beneath the half-collapsed awning, wind tugging at her coat. The silence was vast. And then, footsteps. She turned sharply. Evan stepped out from the shadow of the overpass. Older somehow, leaner, his hair longer and streaked with gray at the temples. But his eyes, those eyes, were exactly the same. Wounded, cautious, soft. For a moment, neither moved. Then Lila took one step forward. And so did he. When they finally met in the middle, her breath caught. You look tired, he offered with a weak smile. Alive, she whispered. He nodded, eyes glistening. You found me. She didn't know whether to slap him or collapse in him. Why, Evan? Why not tell me anything? He exhaled slowly. Because I didn't want to drag you into the hell I was running from. They sat on a nearby bench, the wood creaking beneath them. It started 8 years ago, he said, voice steady but low. I was working under my real name, Thomas Reynolds, for a security firm that dabbled in less-than-legal contracts. One of those clients was Conrad Chevalier. I found something I shouldn't have. Corporate espionage was just the start. Human trafficking, arms sales, deep stuff. I reported it to the feds. They offered me a deal, testify, go into witness protection. Lila blinked, stunned. And then you became Evan. Yes. New name, new city, new history. I was finally building something that felt normal. Then I met you. A long pause. You were my peace, Lila. My second chance. And I kept telling myself the past couldn't find me. But it did. 2 weeks before the wedding, I got a call. An anonymous voice said, if you love her, you'll leave. Or she dies first. Her breath hitched. I thought I could fake it. Go through with the wedding, figure things out after. But when I saw Alec Gordon's face in the crowd, he looked down. I knew it wasn't a bluff. That was blood on his hands. He'd killed before. He would kill again. You could have told me, Lila said, tears thickening her voice. We could have run. Together. I couldn't ask you to live like that. Always looking over your shoulder. That's not love. That's imprisonment. Her hand reached out slowly, resting over his. Warm. Real. I never stopped loving you, he said, barely a whisper. She nodded, tears slipping free. Neither did I. They sat in silence, the wind whispering around them like an old song. Time suspended, truth lay bare. But it wasn't the end. It was the breath before the final storm.